Remembering a global fashion icon while celebrating a Jamaican icon. Weekend Business Report starts right now. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Kenil Gale. Thanks so much for joining us this week. The fashion world lost an icon last month, but the show must go on. That man show was not lost on the House of Chanel, which staged a fitting tribute during Paris Fashion Week. More on that in a bit, but right now let's get to some of the week's top stories from the BATV News Desk. Opposition spokesman on finance Mark Golding says the government's $14 billion tax break for the 2019-2020 fiscal year will not benefit the average Jamaican. Mr. Golding was making his contribution to the budget debate in Parliament on Tuesday. Jamila Maitland tells us more.
While many Jamaicans welcomed the government's $14 billion tax rollback, the opposition's People's National Party is criticizing it. Shadow Minister of Finance Mark Golding has slammed the changes, saying they won't benefit the average Jamaican. Come April 1, minimum business tax and asset tax payable by non-financial institutions will be abolished. The GCT threshold will increase, ad valorem stamp duty will be replaced, and the rate of transfer taxes for properties will be reduced. But the PMP spokesman said none of these changes will impact the lives of the regular Jamaican, especially those living in similar inner-city constituencies like the one he represents.
Mr. Speaker, will the reduction in transfer tax and stamp duty, will the abolition of minimum business tax or asset tax on companies make Miss Maureen's life any better next month or the month after that? Their answer is no. Taxpayers like Miss Maureen deserve better.
Mr. Golding said there was an additional $16 billion that the government could have rolled back so more Jamaicans could feel the economic prosperity that the Holness administration often bragged about.
The government could reduce the GCT rate from the 16.5% where it is to return that $16 billion to ordinary Jamaican consumers and still see its revenue keep pace with inflation. The people, Mr. Speaker, would have greatly appreciated such an ease-up in the GCT.
Tax collection is projected to increase by $47 billion for the next fiscal year. But Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark was forced to rubbish claims that there may have been some hidden or increased indirect taxes. However, Mark Golding argued that based on the projection, the government could have lowered the GCT or SCT, which is a tax levied on gas as a hedge insurance. He said the government is unfair to the people since they've abandoned the hedge, but is still collecting the tax.
They could have given the traveling public an ease up from the high fuel prices. I'm talking about the taxi man and his passengers, the bike man doing deliveries, the truck man bringing in food from the country, the pensioners who have to buy gas out of their fixed incomes. All of them deserve a break from the heavy taxes.
And on Thursday, it was the opposition leader's turn to weigh in on the budget. Dr. Peter Phillips argued that the $14 billion tax break will only increase Jamaica's economic inequality and won't facilitate the prosperity that the Holness administration often brags about.
Damagement. That's what opposition leader Dr. Peter Phillips is calling the government's management of the country's programs and resources. Dr. Phillips is echoing the claims of Shadow Minister of Finance Mark Golding that the $14 billion tax break will not benefit the average Jamaican, but increase the country's economic inequality gap.
Budget presented by Santa Clark, the Minister of Finance, gives us little comfort in the fact that it excluded the majority of Jamaicans. That is not how you build a Jamaica that works for all. Not only is the official narrative out of touch with the people's reality, but it is also woefully out of touch with the growth realities of the economy.
He says Jamaica's continuous slippage on several global indices is evidence of the country's downfall in economic growth.
Forbes' Best Countries for Business report, Jamaica fell from 72 to 80. On Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, we fell from 68 to 70. And in the World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Report, Jamaica's fell from 70 to 79. That is not heading in the right direction. That is heading the wrong way.
Dr. Phillips says the delays in finishing several major projects are stifling the country's growth. He listed the Hagley Park and Constant Spring roadworks as prime examples.
We're spending most of the time the last few months getting water truck to schools, to basic schools, to people, to residential communities, satisfying businesses. Quite frankly, I believe there is a case for legal action to be taken by many of those businesses against the state. Some of them have gone out of operation.
In the meantime, the opposition leader is also calling for a reduction in general consumption tax, GCT. He said if the government truly wants more Jamaicans to benefit from a tax break, then it should lower the GCT. He questioned the government's motive for keeping the special consumption tax, SCT, on gasoline, which was originally implemented to pay for a hedge against high oil prices. The Holness administration has kept the SCT despite abandoning that hedge.
Jamaica calls for the national mobilization of resources to provide quality education and training in order to create the kind of labor force that can modernize agricultural production in coffee, cocoa, cannabis, ginger, and other high-value crops.
He said the government appears to have forgotten about the rural economy, which he argued is the cornerstone for inclusive growth.
If you don't do anything else, reduce the GCT. Do it. Give the consumers a break. As well, remove the SC.
Jamaica is losing some $39 billion worth of water every year. The figure was revealed by CEO of the National Water Commission, NWC, Mark Barnett, while speaking at a luncheon hosted by the Rotary Club of Kingston on Thursday. Sinead Johnson has more.
NWC CEO Mark Barnett says the company plans to do more to provide adequate water for Jamaicans, but he says they face a lot of challenges. This includes losses of $39 billion worth of water each year.
About 126 billion meter cube of water per year that is considered non-revenue. And if you break that down based on the global population, you're looking at 77 liters per capita per day that is lost. And so you could look at it to say that's water that I could use quite easily, and which is actually water that is treated, distributed, but it is lost in some way through the system.
He says some of the company's challenges are the result of illegal activities by some citizens.
Water losses are made up of commercial losses, unauthorized consumption, and yes, those are the persons who are stealing. And we have customer meter inaccuracies. So if your meter is aged over 5 years or older, you're invariably getting the benefit of that meter. And we have physical losses, and you'll notice the difference. Physical losses account for the greater portion of my water losses. And physical losses is really leaking pipes. Whether or not I'm seeing them, that's what physical losses is.
The CEO says the company will be doing more to fix the distribution issues.
We are mapping everything and have it in a database, geographic information system. And each leak that is seen or reported is mapped, the material, etc. And that is now how we are moving to function as an enterprise, where you have information quite easily. And we are hydraulically modeling, which speaks to what pressures you're going to get, because the point is we need to normalize the pressure right across the network.
The CEO says the company has adopted a new approach to co-manage, where it will have experts coming in to help resolve some of its internal issues.
Moving on now, on February 19, fashion icon Karl Lagerfeld passed away. 2 weeks later, under the dome of Paris's Grand Palais, his colleagues and clients got to see his final creations for Chanel. There are also some other major standouts from this year's Paris Fashion Week. Let's take a look.
Just 2 weeks after losing its iconic creative director, France's most respected couture house nonetheless had a show to put on. And what a show it was. Karl Lagerfeld may no longer be with us, but Chanel's Autumn-Winter 2019-2020 collection was our chance to see the couturier's final designs, all set against a snowy mountain backdrop. Paris's Grand Palais was transformed into a wintry idyll, the serene mise-en-scène providing an appropriately contemplative atmosphere.
I spent half of my life with him. I saw him more than I saw my own father. That says it all.
It's morning, but I feel like it's the evening. It's like watching the train leave the station. It feels like the end of an era.
It's strange. I don't know how to put it. It's the first time I've come to a Chanel show and Carl's not here. There's no other word for it but strange. It's strange.
One by one, models emerge from a wooden chalet, and then a minute's silence. These silhouettes are the result of a collaboration between Lagerfeld and his right-hand woman Virginie Viard. After working by his side for 30 years, Viard has now been named Chanel's new creative director in his place. She'll now have to work out how to respect the legacy not only of Coco Chanel, but Lagerfeld too. The show's finale was both a celebration and a moment of high emotion. Some of the models couldn't help but show it.
He was an incredible man, and he will be very missed. And I'm very honored to be part of what happened here today. There is so much love for him.
As for the collection itself,
It was incredible, deeply emotional, beautiful collection.
Karl Lagerfeld used to say that fashion is always about looking forward, that embracing change is the surest way to survive. And it's an approach that's been adopted across the board. The sportswear aesthetic has certainly had its time in the limelight. Just how much longer can labels hope to sell slogan t-shirts for hundreds of euros? The best fashion houses know their technical and design expertise are their biggest assets. And nowhere is that truer than at Louis Vuitton. The label's creative director, Nicolas Guesquière, opts for the same approach for his decor. For this latest collection, the Louvre's courtyard was transformed into a replica of the Pompidou Centre.
He just always manages to do this very futuristic thing, but I love the kind of 80s throwback of it. I love the hair and makeup. I just thought the girls looked really powerful, and I just think it's a good time for women to be strong, and that show represented it.
Grungy dresses and leather skull caps were the order of the day, with Guesquière openly playing with the label's aesthetic codes. The Vuitton checkerboard print was on proud display too, the black and white evoking old-fashioned racetrack glamour.
I thought it was beautiful, superb, so modern, so avant-garde. It was amazing, so beautiful.
And no assessment of the fashion avant-garde is complete without including Tokyo-born Yohji Yamamoto. At 75 years old, the designer's lost none of his trademark humour. A number of gloves grafted onto the clothes had their middle fingers pointed skyward in a presumed tongue-in-cheek FU to the fashion world.
I think it's about simplicity. It's about the essence, black, shadow. It's a very significant style that is evolving, but it's also ever graceful and very iconic.
For his finale, Yohji Yamamoto brought out a number of female samurai figures, draped in deconstructed capes.
You have to wear it, and you have to embrace what your style is, and then it doesn't matter, anything can be sexy. Yeah.
Yamamoto proves it's no bad thing to think outside the box when it comes to the way we dress, something fellow designer Stella McCartney is also embracing. The global textile industry is a major source of pollution. She's determined to change that.
I love Stella. I think what she stands for, what she does with her sustainability clothing, I think she's incredible and she's a good friend.
surprise!
McCartney has a lot of famous friends. They're coming together to help her raise awareness of the problem of mass deforestation in Indonesia.
I love the show. Saw 7 things I'm gonna buy. Thank you.
Stella McCartney uses vintage fabrics and upcycled t-shirts where she can. She's never afraid of asking the difficult questions.
How we want to wear clothes and how we want our wardrobes to look, and supplying and giving an exciting new option to people.
And that's thanks to engineers as much as it is to stylists.
Or we're growing a mushroom leather in a laboratory so you're not killing an animal. We can't be that stupid. Come on.
Oh, we did it! It seems Karl Lagerfeld was right all along. The survival of fashion, and indeed the planet, relies on change.
Company news comes up next, then later, she still got it. At 70 years old, Grace Jones shows everybody why she's an icon. More WBR after this break. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. Here's this week's company news.
Sagicor Investments and Sagicor Bank has raised $180 million for local utility provider JPS. The funds were raised through 2 bond offers and syndicated loans. The proceeds will go towards refinancing some of the utility company's debt. The bond offers opened on February 8 and closed on the 22nd. They saw Sagicor Investments raising $10.7 billion Jamaican dollars and $34 million in bonds, while Sagicor Bank raised $66 million in syndicated loans. The debt offering was taken up by local banks, institutional investors, and retail clients. Guardian Life is reporting the highest consolidated net profits in the company's 20-year history. The company says it has achieved consolidated net profit of $6.9 billion during 2018, which proved to be a record year for growth in many areas. The organization now has a net worth of over $155 million after dividends are paid to shareholders. The KLE Group says roadwork on Constant Spring Road is stifling its major revenue earner. The group says the disruption has resulted in the popular restaurant losing millions of dollars. Total revenue for the 2018 financial year was $219.9 million compared to $226.8 million in 2017, a decrease of approximately 3%. Over 90% of KLE's revenue is from its flagship restaurant Usain Bolt's Tracks and Records in Marketplace, but that location did not do too well last year. The company says while the first half of the year was good for restaurant sales, the second half saw a drastic reduction in revenue performance of more than 15% below budget. The drop in revenue was directly attributed to the major roadwork repairs happening along the Constant Spring Main Road in Kingston.
Let's now take a look at how some of the major stock markets around the world ended the week. When we come back, more of the week's top stories, so stay with us. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. More news now. Minister of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries, Audley Shaw, is calling for the swift revision of the Fisheries Act to implement new measures to protect the island's conch industry. The government recently announced a 1-year ban on conch fishing after studies show that the species in Jamaican waters is almost depleted. Here's more.
The Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries says it will be intensifying sanctions and security to protect the country's queen conch industry. The government announced a sudden season close which took effect on March 1 and is expected to end on January 31 next year. Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries Audley Shaw says illegal fishing is the main factor behind the ban. He said the fisher folk, both local and foreigners, continue to exploit the existing queen conch population. A scientific assessment last November conducted by the ministry revealed that the conch stocks are now degraded.
The closed season has already commenced and will last up until January of next year, 2020. The depletion of the conch fishery has resulted from several factors. We are certain that illegal fishing is a major cause. I think I need to repeat that. We are certain that illegal fishing is a major cause of this degrading of our industry.
Reports are that last week, the JDF's Coast Guard seized 2 illegal boats from the Dominican Republic. The fishermen were caught with queen conch and other fish. The minister, who revealed that the court case is expected to start soon, wants the poachers to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
It is indeed my hope that our courts will send the strongest signal possible to all poachers, both local and foreign, that Jamaica is very serious about protecting our fisheries resources.
But how can the industry be protected when the existing fines for illegal fishing is viewed as just a slap on the wrist? That is why Minister Shaw says he's ordered a swift review of the sanctions under the Fisheries Act. The act was recently amended, but the sanctions weren't updated.
I want a review of our laws surrounding this issue to see whether it needs to be strengthened. Because the preliminary information that I have is that a lot of these poachers, when caught and brought to the courts, get slapped on their wrist and they get back their equipment and they go on about their business. No doubt to return to our shores in good time to continue with their illegal activities. I want a review of the laws.
Meanwhile, seafood businesses say they will have to adjust their operations to adhere to the government's sudden closure of the conch season. More in this report.
With the abrupt closure of the conch season, seafood businesses say their revenues will be negatively affected. A representative from Rainforest Seafood, who didn't want to be identified, says the absence of conch products will impact the company's cash flows. He, like the managing director of Tom Rick Enterprise, Sidney Francis, says they're hoping that the conch stock will be replenished come January 31, 2020, when the ban is scheduled to be lifted. However, unlike the management at Rainforest Seafood, Mr. Francis, who operates a smaller business, says workers will have to be laid off.
It will impact us severely because even the workers will have to lay off a number of workers. Only hoping that that in another year time things will come back, but it is not going to affect just my area and me, but there's something like 127, I believe, fishing villages around Jamaica. And conch have something to do with all of them.
Mr. Francis, who exports almost 100% of his company's catch, says he now has to seek alternatives from other fish species.
90% of our business is export, conch, lobster, and sea cucumber, So what we'll have to concentrate on now is just the lobster and the sea cucumber until an open that the conch will come back within a year.
Mr. Francis, who has been fishing for over 30 years, says he has never witnessed any such depletion. However, he's blaming it on foreign poachers from the Dominican Republic, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Venezuela.
We have been warning the government for many years now about the poaching, what has been going on. It has been, and we know that one day it would reach this stage. because over the last 2 years we have been seeing a little decline in the size of the count.
The Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority, JCAA, has joined many other countries to ban the MAX 8 and 9 variants of the Boeing 737 aircraft from Jamaica's airspace following last Sunday's crash of an Ethiopian Airlines 737 MAX 8. Javon Keys tells us more.
Sunday's crash of the Ethiopian Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircraft has sent global aviation bodies into action. Today, the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority (JCAA) issued a safety directive regarding the operation of all MAX variants of the Boeing 737. Director General of the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority, Nari Williams Singh, says this prohibits the operation of the aircraft in Jamaica's airspace.
The directive indicates that the particular aircraft, which is a 737 MAX aircraft, are restricted from operating in and out of Jamaica, as well as in the Kingston Flight Information Region, which is much larger than the actual Jamaican landmass. So this particular aircraft is restricted from those operations.
According to Mr. Williams Singh, the Kingston Flight Information Region is many times larger than Jamaica's landmass and includes as far as the Cayman airspace. In the meantime, he says there will be sanctions for breaches of the directive, although this is unlikely.
In terms of sanctions, they would be in breach of the Jamaica Civil Aviation Regulations, and so there would be a process that would go through to deal with any breach of the regulations. However, it is highly unlikely that this should occur, given that a number of states countries have also issued similar flight bans for their flight restrictions for the particular type of aircraft. It's highly unlikely that would occur.
Mr. Williams Singh, who is also chairman of the Caribbean Aviation Safety and Security Oversight System, says within the region, Trinidad and Tobago has also taken a similar approach. However, it's unlikely that one directive from the entire region would be given.
This decision is taken by individual sovereign states. I do know that Trinidad has issued a similar restriction as we did. And of course, yesterday the United States Federal Aviation Administration, as well as the Canadian authorities, issued similar restrictions. But in the region, I am aware that Trinidad has issued a similar restriction at this time.
The local directive by the JCAA comes hours after U.S. President Donald Trump directed the FAA to ground all 737 MAX aircraft operating in the U.S. Cayman Airways was one of the first carriers globally to ground its MAX fleet, followed by a number of Chinese carriers. Boeing has since grounded all its MAX fleets globally. The no-fly directive is indefinite and will likely persist until a cause of the incidents involving the Lion Air and Ethiopian air crashes has been clarified.
When we come back, Grace Jones is still turning heads at 70. More on the Jamaican icon after this break. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. She's 70 years old, but she's still able to shut down any catwalk. Grace Jones showed Paris Fashion Week just why she's an icon.
Okay, y'all, moving on. Can we say Zendaya for the win? The actress and songstress turned fashion designer debuted her first Tommy Now collection for Tommy Hilfiger at Paris Fashion Week. Now, Zendaya had all of the top models grace the runway, but there was one icon that stole the entire show, honey. Guess who, Gary? The legendary Grace Jones, honey.
What? Jones,
yeah. And she showed everybody that she can still pull up to her bumper, baby.
And that's our show for this week. On behalf of the entire Week in Business Report team, I'm Keneal. See you next time.